place and it's like $17 here.
Can you do me a favor? Be honest with me really quick. Are American tourists the problem?
Sino nagsasabi? Mama ang kapsita?
No, realistic. I think it's...
Oh, we're getting a bell.
Very
Franklin! Meant to be open? We don't run any.
We absolutely adore traveling around the world when we get the opportunity, but when we do, sometimes we make a few mistakes that rub people the wrong way. So I'll ask again, are we the problem? I know I've done some things that were absolutely insane, especially when traveling to new countries for the first time, and I've learned from my mistakes. I still tend to make mistakes from time to time because like anybody else, I'm human at the end of the day, but we're going to be looking at a lot of different experiences of American tourists just doing some diabolical things while finding ways to adjust to their new environment. Now, you guys have a ton of stories about us Americans out there messing things up or trying to mold with the world and it just not really working out too much. There's a thing called US defaultism where we bring our laws, rules, regulations, and culture with us when we travel to other countries and we try to apply what we know to our new environments. Now, I'm not saying this is exclusive to just us, but in the case of US defaultism, it definitely is. So if you guys have a crazy experience dealing with one of us Americans, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you guys are returning viewers, welcome back. Help us hit 1 million subscribers by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel.
How much do I tip in Germany?
In Germany, tipping is more modest than in some other places. Typically rounding...
So like 20%?
No, not quite that high. In Germany, around 5 to 10% is considered polite.
What?
Often.
But how do people make their money?
Not gonna lie, when I found out that 5 to 10% is what you usually tip in Germany, my jaw almost hit the floor because I'm like, that's not a whole lot. And people were like, yeah, because people actually get paid a livable wage in the service industry in Germany. And I'm like, they don't rely on the tips? You guys heard me rant and rave about the tipping culture in America. It's genuinely diabolical. And here's a video that perfectly explains exactly what that culture is like.
The tipping culture in the US is actually on a very different level. So if you're planning to travel here, this is something really important you need to take into consideration, because tipping here is not just a voluntary act. It is actually considered as mandatory in a lot of places where service is being provided. It can come out as offensive or rude if you do not pay the minimum tipping amount, which is about 15%. But to put this into perspective, let me show you something. So I just had breakfast somewhere and the cost for the breakfast was $60. And then there was the sales tax, which is $5.85. And then there was kitchen appreciation fee, which I have no idea what this is about. But then suggested tip minimum was 20%, 22%, and 25%. And this is actually not very common in a lot of places, including where I come from, which is Zanzibar in Tanzania, where tipping is voluntary and you pay based on how much you enjoyed the service and with no fixed amount. I ended up paying $85, which was okay for me, but this could not be the case for every single person. So it really brings me to the conclusion on the reason why American tourists tend to tip more when they travel abroad, because they continue the tipping culture that they're used to back home whenever they travel. So I wanted to ask you a question on what do you think about this? Do you think tipping should be voluntary or it should be mandatory? And what's the tipping culture in the place where you come from?
I think it's borderline criminal, but you guys can let me know if you agree, because I have had issues with the tipping culture throughout the United States for a long time, and I'm not alone. There are other people from the United States as well who also feel the same way. It has gotten out of control. For all my Germans out there, is 5 to 10% a reasonable tipping amount when dining in restaurants? I mean, it does seem a little low to me, but it also seems reasonable.
In Germany, service staff do get a base wage that's generally higher than in places.
Yeah, but it's like $2.
It might feel low compared to some places, but in Germany, minimum wages and social benefits are structured differently. Tipping is just a small extra gesture on top, not a necessity for making ends
no,
meet.
tipping is how waiters make their living.
Ah, you see what he did there? That is what we call US defaultism. Applying what applies to the United States to another country, in case you needed a very clear, glaring example of what that is.
Absolutely the case in some countries. But in Germany, wait staff rely more on their base wages and social protections.
I'm just gonna tip 20%.
If that's what you're comfortable with, it will certainly be appreciated. Just know that it's above
Or
the norm.
25%.
I tell you guys all the time that generally when I do tip, it's a pretty sizable chunk of money, mainly because I did not tip at all for a long period of time because I did not know that that's what was expected in the United States. And when I found out that the service workers did not get paid a livable wage, I automatically assumed that they did, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel bad. So I started tipping large amounts, but I don't do it randomly right? I do it when I appreciate the service. So even when I'm out traveling and stuff, like I've told you guys, when I go to Germany, there have been times where I have tipped a sizable amount of money, depending on where I'm eating at and how well the service was. If the service wasn't abysmal and I was, and I really love it, then I will show appreciation that way. Now, obviously, a thank you and all of the other things come along with that, even if I did not tip that much. But to me, I really want that service worker to know that this random person really appreciates their work.
You can absolutely be as generous as you like.
30%.
You're free to do that if you want to.
What about
Just
35%?
You can certainly do that if
40%.
At that point, it would be seen as extremely generous.
So obviously the comment section had a lot to say, and our first comment was very interesting because I shared the exact same opinion. Bro, let him talk. Yeah, his interruptions were kind of annoying, not gonna lie. I'm too European for this. For all my Europeans watching this video, I have a very interesting question. How much do you guys usually tip throughout your respective countries? Is the tipping culture generally the same throughout all of Europe, or does it vary on a grand scale? 5 to 10% seems to be what's acceptable in Germany, but is that also what's acceptable in Spain, in Greece, the Netherlands, Belgium, Romania, Estonia? Is the tipping rate about the same throughout all of those countries? If the bill is 46 euro, I pay 50 euro. I also heard about this theory as well, rounding to the nearest 10. So if I have a bill that's $23, then rounding up to 30 for the tip. If I had a bill that was $25, then again, rounding up to 30. If it was $35, then 40, so forth and so on. Would that be a reasonable way to tip as well? If your bill is 29 euro and you pay 30 euro instead, I wonder if that's still acceptable, because how it was explained to me, you could do something like that. But if that's not acceptable and that's too low, let me know in the comments down below. If that's perfectly fine, also let me know in the comments down below. I pay what I ordered. Tipping is not necessary. I wonder that too. How many of you guys that go to restaurants eat the food and actually don't leave a tip when you're done? You just pay what you ordered and then leave. Was a lot to cover in that video. Let's go over a few of the things that we saw, because I have a lot to say. The first thing this individual mentions about things that Americans can't handle in Europe is the lack of the automatic gearbox in cars. And you're right, I can't handle driving manually. I had the golden opportunity to learn how to drive manual when I was learning how to drive a car. And for those that don't know, I've beaten this point into the ground a million times, but I grew up in the city. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I took public transportation all over the place. I do think, honestly, in my opinion, that it is the best public transportation system in the entire United States. And therefore I'd never needed to know how to drive. So it wasn't until I was 21 that I finally learned how to drive a car. And my friend was like, you should learn how to drive manual since you've never touched a vehicle before. And I'm like, that would make sense.
No.
And then I proceeded to learn how to drive automatic. And I literally, it confuses me looking at manuals, man. Like, looking at a manual car to me looks like the equivalent of operating a Gundam. And I can't do it. I did hear though that a lot of cars are switching over to being more automatic throughout Europe than manual. I'm not sure how true that is, but that's just something that I've heard over the years. As the time has progressed, there have been more and more available automatic cars, and I think that's beautiful because I love automatic vehicles. What about you guys? Do you guys prefer manual vehicles or automatic vehicles? Let me know in the comments down below. The next thing that she covered was the tiny parking spaces. Throughout all of Europe, the streets are significantly smaller than how they're designed in the United States. The United States, it's a very young country, right? So our infrastructure is built around the car. Of course, the roads are going to be wider and thicker, which is why you have big trucks all over the place and wide body cars. And our parking spaces are massive. I think a large portion of America's land is taken up from just parking spaces. There's a whole video on that somewhere on YouTube. I think the channel Not Just Bikes covers that actually. And it is remarkable how much parking has taken up the amount of space it has throughout the United States, honestly. So when I was in Europe, I was like, oh my gosh, these parking spaces kind of tiny. It didn't matter which country I traveled to throughout Europe, right? That was the one common denominator that I noticed, aside from the cobblestone. She also did cover real cigarettes versus flavored air. Now, I don't smoke at all right? And That's just me. But the vaping culture in the United States is absolutely diabolical. Vaping culture in general is diabolical. Well, I forgot that real cigarettes existed until I went to Germany, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I was shocked at the amount of people that smoked like traditional cigarettes, let alone vaped, right? Now, obviously in my personal life, there's a lot of people I know that vape, and I'm like, and I don't think twice about that, but all of a sudden somebody pulls out a cigarette and I'm like, oh. So the amount of people that I've seen that used cigarettes over actual vapes throughout Europe, it was a little interesting to me. I always joke that, like, you know, one of my very first experiences in Europe was Germany, right? And I felt like I was stepping into the 50s because it was like every other person had a cigarette in hand, puffing on, you know, and I'm like, good Lord. I just thought it was interesting. And then the friends that I had, it was like they would take smoke breaks every 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you guys were that stressed out. That was an interesting observation. But my question to you guys is smoking culture popular where you guys are? Now, I think the perception of what smoking culture is going to vary, because us Americans definitely think that we have less of a smoking culture than Europeans, for sure. Because vaping, to me personally, I think vaping and smoking fall under the same category, and to some degree. Obviously, cigarettes are probably worse for you than vaping, for sure. None of them are good for you. They're not gonna give you health perks if you smoke them. So for any European watching this video that has traveled to the United States at all, did you think that there was a sharp decline in the number of people that you notice that smoke or vape versus what you've seen throughout Europe? Or do you actually think that there was even more people that were partaking in the smoking festivities in the United States than Europe? And I'm not talking about weed, I'm just straight up talking about regular tobacco. Now, I'm not gonna lie, she got us on this one. Using legs as a form of transportation, most Americans would crumble if they realized they needed to walk from point A to point B. The United States is prideful of the fact that we have turned our country a long time ago into a car country. We need vehicles to move from point A to point B, no matter what. One of the things a lot of people make fun of Americans for, especially when they come and visit, is they notice that there are those huge parking lots that have tons of stores surrounding them, right? You'll have a strip mall that's huge, L-shaped even. And you'll have a store on one end of the parking lot, and people will drive their car close to that store, go shopping. And then within the same parking lot, they will get in their car, park on the opposite side of the parking lot, and go to a different store instead of walking to the different store. And I'm like, bro, America, our obesity rate's kind of diabolical right now. And it's only getting better. Not in a good way. Now, the bakeries, oh my goodness. If there was one thing that I specifically appreciated about Germany, was their bread. Oh my gosh. The bakeries that I went to in Germany are a force to be reckoned with. What country in Europe, in your opinion, has the best bread? She got us on the water isn't free thing. Water is not free, and I was definitely not a fan of that. I got used to it though, but water not being free I thought was wild work. Turns out tap water is free, so there's like a little asterisk on top of that. And then, of course, she brings up the good quality of food, and we can chain that in with the bread. The food in Europe just does not have the same chemicals that the food in America has, which is actually what makes that food in Europe thoroughly better than what we have in the United States. Now, we have some delicious tasting food in the US, man. I love me some food from the United States, but if you're wondering why you feel a certain way after you're done eating, a lot of that has to do with the chemicals that are allowed to be in that food. We have food that will last centuries because of the preservatives that are in them, and those preservatives do not exist in a lot of European food, and that's remarkable because the end result is high quality food, longer lifespans, and happier people. No auto gearbox as you get into a Tesla. The irony. Been to Europe. It's actually softer than the US, and I can drive a stick and walk 20 miles. Well, good for you. That's not the average populace of the United States, though. Now, I can also sympathize with you. I also myself can walk 20 miles if I really put my mind to it. But I cannot drive a stick shift. That's just not in the cards for me. My cousin from rural Moldova came to visit me in New York City and couldn't handle walking all day. I do have something to add to this. When I was in Germany, right, I was in Cologne, and I went to the Cologne Cathedral, or the Kölner Dome. Two of my German friends, they could not keep up with me, man. They couldn't keep up with me. I climbed the whole church tower up to the tippy top, like many people do. A lot of people do it as a morning exercise routine, right? But my two German friends couldn't keep up with your boy. But I think the United States, right? I know we talk about the obese culture, and I literally just did in this video because it's true. We have a high obesity rate, but I also think that the United States operates in extremes. I also think we have a high amount of incredibly fit people. There's like a huge disparity, right? It's like you're either morbidly obese or incredibly fit. And there are a lot of people that fall in that in between, but if you look at the dips and the peaks and valleys in our healthy individuals when it comes to like our personnel here, it's interesting because there are a lot of gym freaks throughout the United States that do some insane things. We have triathletes, we have people who just lift weights to look like huge roided out bodybuilders, tons of marathon runners. So I feel like we do pride ourselves in extremes. We're either extremely lazy or extremely fit. Yeah, no AC is fine because it's like 72 there, and that's a heat wave. Heat waves here are up in the hundreds. A little dig at the Celsius versus Fahrenheit thing I saw for the numbers there. But yes, the heat waves get actually incredibly wicked throughout the United States. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. And I just do love the fact that AC is an option. Also, in South Korea, AC is an option as well. I mean, in a lot of places throughout Asia, AC is also an option. So I'm like, you know what? Having it is better than not, I feel like, right? Like if you have it and you don't use it, then cool. Your electricity bill will be very low or your heating bill will be very low. But if you need to use it, then hey, net positive because you're cool now. And, you know, yes, it'll be a bit more expensive, a lot more expensive to be honest. But after the heat wave is gone, which apparently throughout Europe, it's only like, what, 2 weeks? It depends on where you live, to be honest. But once the heat wave is over, then you don't have to worry about it. I do think that a lot of people's solution is just open up the window, bro. But like, it depends. If it's in the summertime and it's hot outside, you're just letting hot air in the house as well. And I know circulating air is better than stale air, but like hot air is still hot air.
This is so crazy. Like, I know, like, I just bought like a week's worth of groceries and it was like $17 here.
First of all, I feel your pain. Second of all, you might have had a lot of interesting looks with that little reaction you just gave, but I get it. I get it. The groceries in the United States are abysmally expensive, okay? Inflation has been hitting the nation stupid style. Although inflation has been hitting the world pretty crazy style recently, and it's not fun. Not fun at all. Hopefully things get better soon. The amount of things you can get throughout Europe in a supermarket with the equivalent of $17 is astronomically more than what you can get through a supermarket location in the United States with $17. Again, because of how inflation has hit the market and affected the cost of groceries. And I thought that was pretty interesting. For those people that are living in Europe right now currently, do you feel like the grocery prices are very pricey or not? Because I know that as Americans traveling throughout Europe, we think that it's very cheap and affordable, whatever, but we also have jobs that pay us a different amount of money in the United States, and in Europe it varies. If your job doesn't pay as much as a job in the United States and you know the price is what it is there, then food might feel way more expensive because it is more expensive in relation to the job market. For $17 in America, that's eggs and bread. And trust me, eggs would eat up most of that $17. Eggs would probably run you about 13 bucks. Okay. That's a little over $1 per egg for a dozen. That's insane. Wait, but Ireland has one of the most expensive groceries in the EU. And that's exactly why I asked what I asked earlier. How are those grocery prices throughout Europe? Would you say throughout Europe, depending on what country you're from, are the grocery prices expensive in relation to what the average jobs that people are getting are? Jesus, how expensive is it in America? Because it's gotten insanely expensive in Ireland in the past 2 years. And that's what I was hinting at. I'm like, hey, I low-key feel like worldwide, those prices for food are pretty wild right now. About a week of groceries in Ireland and they went bad in 4 to 5 days. I then realized that America basically just feeds us chemicals. That was a decade ago. I had a, oh, lunch meat shouldn't last 3 weeks, huh, moment. Yeah, that was also something that was a little interesting for me too, because I'm like, oh, okay, food is definitely cheaper, at least going through Europe and whatnot, the few European countries that I've been to. But of course, because the food is fresh, it also goes bad faster. And I'm like, oh, That's how it's supposed to be. Man, that was a wake-up call and a half. What do you guys think? I know a lot of us Americans definitely are shocked by various things, especially what we saw in this video. You guys let me know, what is the craziest thing one of us Americans has said to you? What is one of the biggest things that Americans get mind blown about in your country?